Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is Saturday. I'm here with Nick. If you're back after last week, we're so happy that we've inducted you into our cult.
Yes.
Our Saturday cult.
Yeah. And we'll never make you drink the Kool-Aid.
No,
Never.
never.
We want you to live.
We're good leaders, so we'll drink the Kool-Aid for you.
Yeah, I don't mind. I've had it.
We're trying to step away from the hypocrisies of being leaders.
Yes.
So, Nick, do you want to take us off on what we're talking about today? It's just like a...
Yeah, absolutely. So today's our second part of the military series, and we're going to talk about military. Last time we were talking about the military identity, somewhat an early film.
Yeah.
Which we wrapped into World War I, World War II. Mm-hmm. And now we can kind of get into our military identity more in modern film.
Yes.
In modern, I would definitely say since, with the onslaught of your... this is when Kubrick really started to really gain some way. I mean, we discussed the Kubrick film with Paths of Glory. A lot of people were early on to it, but now, you're getting into, more big-time Kubrick films. Coppola starts to come into it.
Oh, yeah.
You start getting some Oliver Stone interpretation. So it's a good way to come into it, but it's more modern because this is... Vietnam is kind of essentially where traditional warfare was abandoned. All the tactics, the scheme, everything we learned from World War I, World War II, we found out very quick you can't apply that same thing to Vietnam, and then even more so the quagmire that Vietnam became over time, just the absolute the mess that it became.
And even just how everything changes in terms of how veterans are shown changes, how conflict is shown changes. It gets far more realistic, far more in your face.
It does,
I suppose
because we really hit this rut, if you will, in national American support for the soldier, for the combat, for the warrior, whoever it may be, the airman, the marine, the soldier, the seaman, whoever it may be. We end up, because you bring a great point. At the end of World War II, people are cheering in the streets. War is over. Guys are coming home. They're getting kissed and everything.
Yeah.
People are cheering them. There's big parades and such. Now you go to Vietnam, and you come home, and these veterans are getting spit on by people at the airport.
Called baby killers.
Baby killers. There's these massive protests and such. There's all these anti-war groups that are taking it out on them, not realizing.
Which is not realizing, they're not dealing with the actual issue.
Yes.
Because in a lot of ways, the veteran, having to do all this stuff on the ground, they're as much a victim of, this system.
You're following orders.
Yeah.
And the people, we were talking about the folks behind the scenes. We touched on it last week, the people behind the scenes, who are making the decisions, and how, as military members, we equate that to the politicians, the babble, and have never been there.
Yeah.
They're the ones that these anti-war folks should have gone after.
Yeah.
Because you have once again, you have young men roped into it, sent over to the conflict, they're following orders, they're trying to survive.
Yeah.
Every day is just a matter of survival in a kill or be killed
Vietnam,
environment.
everybody had to go. It didn't matter if you didn't want to,
If you were an able-bodied young man, you were going.
100%.
You were going to go. And that's why, we did start to come out where we had, where we find, in a lot of these Vietnam films, we find that there's directors who actually served.
Oh, yes.
And then we find out that they went to great lengths to speak with veterans and to take what they did and to put it together. So we start to find that out, but it's just so wild when you look at it, because everything's up for World War II, then Vietnam hits and everything just goes to shit.
Yeah.
And the veteran is almost a villain in the United States. But then later on, as we get into the war of our lifetimes, I know you're younger than me, but I mean the first big war of my lifetime that I can remember, of course, was Cold War, which really it's where we vilified the Russians, kind of what we did with the Germans during World War II. This is when we made Russians bad. We could get into a whole thing about anti-Russian propaganda film.
What is it, the thing from Another World, where at the end it's just some Russian man and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then they're like, always watch the skies, and you're like, wait, what?
And so it's we went through this thing, but that was never really a genuine conflict. It was just a giant pissing match of people pointing missiles and building walls. It was okay, cool. But once that was over, the next real conflict that kind of came was Desert Storm, Desert Shield, is when, Saddam Hussein took his Iraqi forces and
and that's all the stuff I remember.
Posed them on the border, and this is probably, this is where we really started to come into. I was in grade school at the time. My dad was on his way over there to be part of it, but at the same time, they poised their forces on the border of Kuwait and said, we're going to take you over. And American got over there, and we made that one. That was quick. Yeah. But at the same time, there was this mass generation of support. People were back on it. It wasn't a Vietnam conflict. People were supporting it. People were behind it. This patriotism kind of came back.
Yeah.
Where patriotism didn't exist during the Vietnam conflict. It was gone. There was no. You weren't American anymore.
Yeah,
you were somebody who used to be an American. You left here to go fight because you followed orders and had no other choice. Now you come home, but now we hate you. So it's crazy how you do it. And then we get into. And then after things kind of simmer down, and Desert Storm, Desert Shield are so quick, everything simmers down. Then all of a sudden we have the attacks on 9/11, and right then and there, like there's going to be a declaration of war. I mean, it's not like there's no way around it.
Yeah.
And once folks found the reasons they believed, they pursued it, and now we're 18 years into this conflict.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, Vietnam is almost, in terms of cinema, it's picking up where we didn't deal quite fully with World War II and all the atrocities we committed, and I guess the shared responsibility we have. Because you talked about this towards the end of the episode last week, with Hiroshima and all of these things, we kind of we went from protecting to becoming a perpetrator, and that dynamic wasn't really something that we see being dealt with in American cinema at all. So then when Vietnam comes around and then it's America becoming a perpetrator again, cinema really took off in terms of dealing with that. Yeah, I
think it really did, and I think it just really falls down to this is a very different time. Laws are different.
Yeah.
What people can get away with are different. There's a lot more freedom to operate within, and I think that the reason that you get some of these directors who were participated in the conflict or were near the conflict or were somehow affected by it or wrote a story about it just by talking to someone from it, I think that you find out that involvement is so much more there. It's so much more real because I don't think that they wanted to see the same thing.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the great things about film. And what we've seen over the past so many years with the big influx of indie films and how well people are doing with independent films and the type of look that stuff's getting. And it's because they have this creative freedom, and that's what's beautiful about film. It's this creative freedom, this artistic expression. And it's a manner in which these guys want to say, hey, this was a big screw up. Like why did we come here? What the hell are we doing? And they want to capitalize on the politics.
Yeah.
And just the absolute disregard of normalcy over there, and a complete abandonment of traditional, theories, morals, ethics, tactics, and strategy. This complete abandonment, and then even the people there questioning. What the hell is going on? What are these decisions they're making in Washington?
Like, why are we here?
Why in God's name are we doing this? Why am I hitting this position instead of this one? This an empty field. I know the weapons cache is here, so why am I dropping an empty field? Like, all these things start to not make sense. And I'll get into a book that I highly recommend for some folks when we get into the films.
Love
it. There's this confusion there, and with the day and age that we were coming into, the modern times that we were starting to come into, and individuals being able to understand, because you got to understand, like, into the Vietnam conflict, this is when we got, like, the bad boys of film coming out of the California film schools, when you're...
It was the new independent age.
You ended up with Lucas and Spielberg, and then you got Scorsese doing brilliant things.
Yeah, Coppola, everyone.
And Coppola, and you have Kubrick, who's just really gaining headway, because he's got some brilliant stuff he let off at that time. Yeah. And so you really end up with these individuals who had some sort of unique exposure to it, and they're just like, wait, you can't stop us. We're gonna tell this story.
Yeah, because Scorsese, some of his early short films, he had, I think it screened at Cannes, but it was called The Big Shave, and it was a short film, and it was this man who's just shaving over and over and over and over and over, and his face keeps getting cut and cut up and more and more and more, and it was an allegory for Vietnam. And then you have Kubrick, who a natural next step for him in terms of dealing with war is Vietnam, because he like we talked about last episode, he really went hard on World War One, and so
well, he nailed it with Paths of Glory. I mean,
100%,
it's one of those things we were talking about, like how there's so few World War One films,
Yes.
you know, and it eerily compares to like how few films we have about the Pacific and World War II. But yeah, this was a World War One film that Kubrick just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
It is the shots, the dialogue, everything is so ahead of its time.
It's so tight.
It is so vivid, but it shows just the real evil of man on the inside as well. You know, I think that's one of those things that Kubrick does really well. He can really highlight the true evil of man.
Yeah, and then really expose kind of, you know, like we were saying, because it's been like a theme throughout, like talking about war, you know, the hypocrisies of everybody who's in charge and not all the people who are actually going through with all of the orders and the people who are on the ground dealing with the situations, you know. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. I have not seen the first film. So talk about it.
The reason I love to highlight this first film is definitely it's an earlier one from Vietnam. It's called The Deer Hunter. And I love this film. It has some spectacular scenes, exceptional star power. Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken,
amazing.
Both are impeccable in this film. God. It's good, but what's really great about this film is it takes it. I kind of highlighted on this when we were discussing, you know, how hard it is to capture time. And what time lapses and like what the individual goes through before they get exposed, and then when they're finally exposed, their life could end a second later. And I was talking about how this process goes on. Well, what's neat about what I love about this film is that it takes two very simple men, guys that were buddies, small town Pennsylvania, hunting deer together, good hunting pals, you know, very simple men. They're settled, they're good. They get pulled from this small town, these two guys get sent off to Vietnam. They end up becoming POWs. And it gives you one of the most, I'm not going to lie, it's one of the most difficult scenes to watch, but it gets you. It really gets you. There's a scene where those two, they've been captured and they're sitting at a table and they're there with their captors, and their captors are forcing them to play a game of Russian roulette with one another. So bullet in the gun, they keep spinning and they don't even do whatever, but they're putting it to their head and they're having to pull the trigger. And you watch these two friends staring at each other in this camp, and you got to put yourself in what the hell's going through. Like these guys were out hunting deer together in small town Pennsylvania, and they got racked from this. They got pulled from it, and now they're POWs, and they got a .357 revolver to their head, pulling the trigger, praying to God that a bullet's not chambered. And the scene goes on for a while, and it gets really tough because, I mean, as they start, De Niro, I'm not going to lie, this is probably one of the finest pieces of method acting you'll ever see. De Niro gets there, and his psyche completely shifts because he starts going mad at the point to where it's laughing as he's holding the gun to his head, and the guy's.
Oh my God! I actually lied. I think I've seen this scene.
You may have seen it because his captor is like telling him. I think he's saying like "umbai" or something to him. I don't know exactly what he's saying, but he's like do it, shoot. And as he's sitting there with a gun to his head, every time he pulls down, this guy just smacks him across the face. And he's like, "You're not getting out of here," and he keeps hitting him, and then finally after a couple of hits, he's like, "Oh!" And now you can tell it's over, and Christopher Walken's just in tears on the other side. And then it changes and they get out of there. But then eventually, like, these guys come home, and this is where the film it's tough, but it's necessary. It's special because you start to see how the war never leaves you when you come home, and you get a very real look at the mental atrocity of post-traumatic stress. You get a really good look at it because these guys, they come home and it's so hard. It's so hard to adjust back to normal after what they had gone through. So I really love The Deer Hunter because of that. It takes them from here, these small town innocent men, never want anything to do with this conflict, none whatsoever. They go there, they do their job, they go through the most horrific of times. And then they come home and you find out like it never ends. It never ends. The war continues on. And so like last time we were talking about, in World War I, World War II, it was, shell shock and everything. Nobody had identified post-traumatic stress.
Nobody was even dealing with it.
And we pushed into it, and now, with Vietnam, it was just like, how long were guys in the shit, you know, as they call it. Anytime you're going into the jungle and to fight, you're going in the shit. That's just how it was, you know. And they said they had, you know, the 1,000-mile stare, where they just sit off and glare and they're lost in their thoughts. You know, they got all these labels, and then we said still, post-traumatic stress was nothing. And I told you about my grandfather who had such horrible bouts with it before he passed away, you know. And then you look at like Desert Storm, Desert Shield, you know, at that point, you know, it was Gulf War syndrome. Yeah. You know, but then now Gulf War syndrome is something completely different, because it's essentially just a lethargy that you're stuck in. And post-traumatic stress became maybe something, but then it really hit Iraq-Afghanistan campaign, and it wasn't until about 10 years into that conflict when you have soldiers coming home and committing suicide because of what went on, because they can't get rid of it, or because they're so, you know, numbed out and hyper-medicated. Because that was the VA's way of saying, I'm sorry you have problems, here, take this. Oh, now you're having trouble sleeping, take this. Oh, now you're in pain, take this. Oh, now you have issues with this, take this. And they're on so much stuff that you just become a shadow of your former self. And unfortunately, for some, the ultimate solution is to take their own life. And that's when it actually started getting attention. It started getting it, like, and can you imagine the countless number of people who probably killed themselves over World War II, who absolutely committed suicide over the Vietnam, or what they dealt with, you know, people that were dealing with Gulf War syndromes and stuff, just dealing with pain. I mean, I know there were veterans that I served with that I know their battle may not have been with PTSD. It may just have been from chronic pain from the years of injuries they took on. But the reason that they were being pumped so many medications, because that's the way they solve it. Take more pills, take more pills, take more pills. They got driven to kill themselves. And that's sad. It sucks when you hear about somebody who you fought side by side with. If you're going to die any time together, that's the time. I shouldn't be getting a phone call or see something on social media saying, oh, God rest his soul, in remembrance. What happened? Was there a car? No, he killed himself. That's terrible. And nobody should have to go through that. But it sucks that that's what it took for post-traumatic stress to finally be recognized, and for the VA to step up and say, we got to start counseling, we got to do something about this, you know. So I think that's why Deer Hunter does a great job. It doesn't matter what conflict you're in. If you're engaged in conflict and you're witness and you're exposed to war, you're gonna come home with baggage. It doesn't just go away. You're gonna come home with it, and that's what I love about Deer Hunter. It takes very simple individuals, and it tells, to me, an American story, because that's the majority. It's not, the majority is not the person that showed up at the recruiter's office. I want to go fight for, no. The majority was these small town young men that, if they were able-bodied, were plucked from their lives and sent over to this with very little, if any, experience whatsoever, in which we can talk more about, like, what takes place between when you're picked up and getting there, when we get into a Full Metal Jacket, you know, toward the end, you know. But yeah, as far as it goes, the Deer Hunter is definitely, it's just highly recommended. It's very earlier. It came out in '78, so it's before Apocalypse Now, Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, all those bevy of films. But I love that story that it follows, and it puts you in the place, and it puts you within that brutality of what went on very deep inside there, and a bit of what a POW would have absolutely endured. You know, which I can highlight on when we get into a few books.
100%. And then, you know, to kind of extend off of that, you see Scorsese's a Taxi Driver. You know, Taxi Driver doesn't deal with any, like, you know, wartime conflict, but Travis Bickle is a Vietnam veteran, and it's showcasing, you know, I know there's, like, a lens with which you can view the film where, like, he's lying about it, but, like, you can also view it from the lens of him kind of being this, you know, veteran who's back in society and he just can't assimilate by no problem of his own, just because the society around him isn't equipped or doesn't want to deal with whatever baggage he has.
But you see how quick he can snap back into combat.
100%, because it's the only answer he has to, you know, his I guess inner workings, you know.
It's the only way there's any normalcy. It's the only way that it's not. It's kind of like everything around him is an illusion. The only thing that's the only reality, the emotional reality he can attach himself to is what he experienced over there. When he's asked to shift back into that identity, he can take a simple situation of trying to rescue,
This
this
child
young hooker,
prostitute,
Jodie Foster, from her pimp, to try and do that, but to him it becomes now, it's not. Now that pimp becomes the Viet Cong.
Yeah.
And that young lady becomes a displaced child.
And he's got to come
and
in like
he's like,
guns a-blazing.
I can handle this. I can save her from what may happen even if this girl comes into the arms of our own troops, what could potentially happen to her. So it's like he gets that mentality. That's why I love, when we were discussing this episode, making notes for it, I was like, oh, the deer hunter, we'll get into Apocalypse Now and this and that.
Yeah.
You were like, we should talk about Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of going, well, I know the guy, and you were like, no, and this is why. And I sat there and went, that's perfect, because it's a great ideal to understand that, it's another lens, like you said, it's another look at when you come home with this, okay, this guy's functioning, he's going about, but when it becomes like this combat situation, now he slides back into the soldier. He's not the taxi driver anymore. He goes to this alter ego, but the thing is, you find out he's so emotionally comfortable with it, and he's so fine, he's so skillful in this identity.
It's the only time he's confident is when he's back in that situation and back in that headspace.
So now, since he's brought the war back with him, so it's just another great lens to look at it through. Of it doesn't leave you. I mean, it similarly equates to like what a lot of veterans have now with post-traumatic stress. One thing is hypervigilance. It's one thing you always have to be concerned about, and it's just like sometimes you can notice veterans out in public because we're constantly, like scanning the room, seeing and you're sure. And you're sitting there just going, okay, all is well, but if something were to go off, what are good defensive positions? Where could I be? Where do I need to be? And you're sitting there and you're just like, wait, what am I doing?
What am I doing?
I'm like, this is on the border.
Yeah.
I mean, Kmart. I'm in Walmart right now.
I'm on the border. Why am I?
I'm trying to order. I'm waiting on chips and salsa, and I'm wondering if this couple over here is going to gun the place down. Where do I dive to?
Which says a lot about where we're at right now. But
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. You get this hyper vigilance, and so you have to. Remind yourself, like, I'm not there. Yeah. Sometimes you'll wake up and you have to do something called grounding because you'll have a dream or something and you'll wake up and still think you're there. So the way they recommend, like, get your feet on the floor, turn the lights on, walk around so like, I'm in my room, I'm in my house, this is carpet, and you can get into it. So there's all these things, but there is that group that can very easily they can slip back into that combat mentality and they can use the skills. Now, oftentimes that's a good thing. Yeah. It's nice to know, it's good to be around folks that can do it, but this one, you see it tip overboard. Yeah. Because you have to understand.
When it goes too far.
If you have to defend yourself or your loved ones or something like that, yes, it's okay to slip back in because you're doing it to protect life. Yeah. But when you're doing it with the intention of taking life, and trying to rescue or remedy a situation that you really are putting yourself into, that's where it changes. Yeah, and ironically, that's where you're going over an edge because now you're okay with killing. Yeah. And it's not that combat. There's a big thing between defending yourself and then actively pursuing a kill.
Yeah, and with the Jodie Foster character, she's probably experienced way more trauma with this final moment where he comes in and he shoots up everybody and he, almost kills himself than she did her entire time, being a child prostitute, And so you have to, also look at it through that perspective. And even cinematically, when you're looking at Travis Bickle's character, we talked about this kind of archetype that you see pop up around veterans. And it's called the Forgotten Man, that you see kind of in the 1930s. And, I think Scorsese in a lot of ways uses Travis Bickle as a resurgence of that archetype in a lot of ways because, it's something, like I said, it's something that, we didn't fully deal with that issue in World War I and World War II, so it keeps coming up because we haven't dealt with it as a society.
Because, like you said, the boys were welcomed home. Yeah, and then now it's like anything you don't like or you don't care for, you forget about it. You try and put it under the rug. You try and, especially specifically if it causes stress or if it causes, an uproar or something like that. You put it away. Yeah. And so that's what happens with the Forgotten Man. It's just and. Vietnam was the easiest war to forget your man. Yeah. You can't forget people when they come home to parades and kisses. You can't you can't forget people when they're put on showcase at a football game or something, you know, and or when you have all these people holding a flag before national anthem or something. You can't do that, you know, when with this modern propaganda machine, you know, that we have now, and the look of the modern soldier, you can't forget that, and because it's now a symbol of victory. It's honorable. It's everything. When it comes to Vietnam, though, with just the world of shit it was, the quagmire that it became, you know, and the people who were in power then, it's just everything. People were like, just forget about it. Forget about it. Erase it. Don't think about it. But the problem is that you have
to.
Hundreds of thousands of young men that were involved in that conflict.
And they're being, like, blamed for, you know, atrocities were committed there, you know, but the problem doesn't lie with the men who were forced to go. It lies with broader structural things.
It lies with the decision makers.
Yeah, 100%. Which is great with all these films, because all of those films, like getting into the next one, Apocalypse Now, it really just puts that all out on display, you know?
Yes, it does. With Apocalypse Now, I mean, God, what an amazing movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you get to see Brando at one of his finest. I mean, yes, everybody's like Godfather. I love Godfather, but when Brando captured Colonel Kurtz so well and made him so vile and terrifying and everything, but then like there's he's a poet at the same time, and it's just the amount of people. I mean, first of all, it's a Coppola film, which already makes it wonderful.
Yeah,
it's like, Coppola, I love it. But I mean, you got Martin Sheen, you know, young Martin Sheen, playing the guy who has to go upriver and kill one of his own, you know, because he's gone astray. You know, you got Marlon Brando as his finest. You got Robert Duvall, is this hellraiser that loves to storm beaches and loves surfing. You know, I mean, you got Harrison Ford in there, you know, who's our young guy, who's our secret ops guy, and is briefing this situation. You're like, what the hell? Dennis Hopper, who's the hippie, wild, off-the-wall cameraman, you know, who follows Kurtz. And then, of course, you have Arlie Ermy, who everybody knows is the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket.
You know, but
he recently died, too. It's crazy. Like, that was earlier this year.
Yes, it was earlier, and he did pass. He's actually a helicopter pilot. He's one of the chopper pilots in it when they're flying in, you know, talking on the radio. Love it. And then you have a very young Lawrence Fishburne. I think he was 15
Wow, I didn't realize he was that young.
And you see him on the boat that's going up the river. But Apocalypse Now, it does such a great job. And the story, because this is one we were talking about, the realities, everything around it is real, and then they put a really neat story into it. And this story's good. It's based out of this book called Heart of Darkness.
Joseph Conrad.
And what's really neat when you finally watch that amazing scene when Colonel Kurtz is addressing Martin Sheen, you know, he's already been put through the gamut, he's been abused, just for Kurtz to be like, I have control of you. I know you're going to kill me, but I want you to know what I was capable of.
And he's like a step ahead of him in a lot of ways.
And he does it intentionally, just to sit there and say, this is what I could have done, but I'm ready to die now. You know, and what's neat is the camera shots coming in as they're panning around the Kurtz. You go by like a nightstand of sorts, and there's books on it. And on the nightstand, Heart of Darkness is on there.
I love that.
And then there's two other books. One is called From Ritual to Romance, and it's about mythology and folklore. And then there's another set called The Golden Bough, and that's about religion and magic. So, and I have these books at home because I saw them, and I knew the story came out Heart of Darkness, so I bought them. And they're wild. I mean,
Heart of Darkness is a wild ride. Everybody should read it.
Get into The Golden Bough when it talks about magic and religion. I was like, oh my God. And then From Ritual to Romance, mythology and folklore, it gets really good. But you kind of get a piece of Kurtz's psyche. But it's crazy because, like, you know, it starts off and it shows us that, you know, this guy can't even leave the jungle. He, let alone come back to the States, because he's in a hotel room. What was that?
He was like,
oh, I finally did it.
Okay, there we go.
But what happened when we get into that piece, like you said, where we talk about, like, it comes home with you. This guy can't even leave the country. He can't even leave the jungle. Like, he needs to be in it.
Gone.
And you get this really great trip of, like, you know, this guy can never go home. He can never go home. He's always going to be, the jungle is a part of him now. And he's uneasy. It's almost like he's fiending. He has a fix for the jungle. It's like you took heroin away from an addict almost, is the way that he acts out. And he has to become like this drunken mess just to get his psyche to suppress long enough for him to sleep. But then he finally gets orders. Then you come into it and you find out there's this Shadow Op project, you know, and they're like, hey, one of our own went AWOL. We want you to terminate him with extreme prejudice, you know, and that's like one of the best parts when he's talking about Harrison Ford and everybody. He's like, extreme prejudice, right? He's like, extreme prejudice.
And the weird thing is, like, the interesting thing is, like to hit on two different notes with Apocalypse Now. I think one of the great things about it is, you know, formatting the story by following the beats of Heart of Darkness is really interesting because it kind of functions as, like, you know, when you look back at, like, Greek mythos and how those stories are constantly retold and those stories are constantly used as, like, you know, foundational elements for stories now because, you know, they hold lessons that we're still trying to come to terms with. I think Heart of Darkness is a really good, it almost serves as a Greek, you know, foundation and Greek core to what Apocalypse Now is, but on the other hand, you know, seeing what the extremes Apocalypse Now goes to, seeing what those extremes show us about the general situation is super intriguing because I think in a lot of ways extremes teach you more about the actual situation than, you know, just the normal elements, the normalized.
You get to kind of, and that's why I love it because with traveling up the river, you're traveling further up into enemy territory. You're starting to get up around Cambodia and stuff. You're getting into areas where Americans don't go. And you're kind of seeing, like, you know, starts in a hotel and he's on R&R, so it's like, Americans are here, we're in Nam, you know, this is where we're at, but it's okay here. This is a controlled city, you can relax, you can drink, you can sleep, do whatever. You know, you got a hot shower. But then once you get back into it, the more that you make it, you know, like now, okay, I'm in a boat. Now I'm having to go in a boat up this river. And then as you're pulling off, you're running into things, but you're not really getting into too much.
Yeah.
But then you encounter, you know, Robert Duvall, and you're like, hey, we got to get our boat here. And he's like, we'll just pick the thing up and drop it. And now you're kind of like getting to an exposure of what happens when these guys get a position to attack and what goes in. And they're starting to charge in here, and everything's just getting destroyed. Women, children, everything. But then you find out they land a chopper, and a woman comes running out and drops a grenade in the chopper and then takes off, and they kill her. And then you find out that there's, you know, these.
Well, that's
these
even like Full Metal Jacket.
And you're like, and you're just like, God, these people will do anything. They'll do anything. It's like, oh Jesus. Then you get on the beach, and then as these guys are settling, there's still stuff going on all over the place, and you know, Sheen's trying to communicate with Duvall, and he's like, what are we doing here? What's going on here? And it's just all over the place. Nobody really knows what's going on. And then the boat drops in, they get back on the boat, and now we're rested of this chaos. But now we get up further, and we find out, you know, that like the Playboy chopper is coming in, you know, and there's a show going on tonight. And these guys know they still have to go upriver further. But, you know, they stop off, they get supplies, they see the R&R. And then they get to see like this little business that's going on, you know, like these guys are like establishing what's going on. So these people are like kind of comfortable with being here, and it's not really technically so hot yet. But then what's amazing is they get further up the river, and you get close to this bridge, and you're seeing all this stuff going off, just fighting going on. You're hearing gunshots and screaming and yelling and all this shit. And one of the greatest parts about that scene is, you know, he's looking for a contact. And the guy comes down, he's like, are you the major? He's, yeah, I got this for you. And he's like, are you the commanding officer? He's like, hell no, I'm just a postman. I'm getting the hell out of here. And he's like, I'm going downriver. I don't care where. And he's getting far away. But then he goes in to look through the trenches for the commanding officer. And he has Lance with him, who's so high on acid at that point that he's like pulling out of the thing. And he does that slow motion part where he pulls him back in. But they get up to guys that are just panicked, freaking out. Then he gets to a comm group. And then they get to the guy that, you know, fires the shell off to kill the final guy, and he's like, hey, soldier, who's your commanding officer? And they do that brilliant piece where they have, like, the light come in and out on Sheen's face, and you're just kind of like, oh, my God, it's just impeccable, you know? And he's like, aren't you? So they don't even know. Like, there's such instability there, and now you know they're going further. And so what you know, is done here, what Coppola does is, he gives us this great thing, but then after we've seen all this go on, this chaos, this atrocity, this utter confusion.
And like it's almost like frogs in like being boiled, where like you don't realize how extreme it's getting because you're normalizing it at every step, you know?
And we know now there's something past.
Yeah.
We've seen the worst, but now somehow this American commander has gone AWOL. There's something worse.
Yeah.
And we don't know it yet. And then we get up the river and we get that, with Lance throwing the smoke bombs, and then we get that brilliant score.
Yes.
As we're pulling in and we start to, the first thing we see after the smoke are just feet dangling in the frame. You're like, what the hell?
That?
And then it comes around and you see like all these folks that are Kurtz's followers, the nationals there. You got them all just kind of staring at him with sticks, and they're painted, and then you see more bodies. And then you start seeing heads, and you're just kind of going,
you're like, what the
God.
actual...
You're like, what hell did I just come into? And then that's where that's when the movie takes that really psychic turn on you. Because Martin Sheen comes up, he knows Kurtz is there.
Martin Sheen is so good.
He starts walking up, and then I love it when he comes up another day.
Yes!
And then they capture him, and then he gets held back, he gets tortured, he gets everything, and that was that time where Kurtz of just saying, this is where, okay, well, I could have taken your life at any point. I accept that you're my slayer.
Yeah.
But I just want you to know.
I need you to understand how I got here.
And it's weird. It's like he's trying to generate an honor almost with his death of, taking this guy down to nothing and trying his will after he's been through the hell. And I think that's a test to really understand, like, this guy is the jungle.
Yeah.
This guy is, if he made it this far and he's a survivor, he belongs here. And so it's almost like he relates with him, almost to be like, hey, brother. But then he wants to capture him and beat him and put him to that test of, are you as strong as what it takes to get here?
Yeah. Spiritually,
mentally, emotionally, physically. And he proves that, but then as a piece of honor, he starts to like revive him. He brings him back to health. And he's like, okay, choose your time. And then we just run with that killer stuff. We're listening to the Doors, the End.
Yeah.
We're watching Sheen come up the hill, and it's so so dark and sinister and just crazy. It gives you goosebumps when you're watching it, and you're just listening to the end, and you're like, oh God. And then it happens, and you're just kind of going, wow. It's like that was a push. But it did good about capturing it, and I could watch Apocalypse Now any day.
It's so good.
A lot of people have horror films like I only like to watch it once or a few times, like I do. Like the next film we'll talk about, Platoon. Oliver.
Speaking of the Sheens.
Yeah. Here comes another Sheen. And, another incredible director.
Yeah.
We have Oliver Stone, who I would highly recommend. He has a thing on Netflix.
He does?
Yes, Oliver Stone made it. It's called The Untold History of the United States.
Oh my God, yeah, that's right.
Highly recommend it. Great stuff, especially about what we were talking about with World War II. It is absolutely amazing the facts that he shows about losses during World War II and what countries lost how many people and like the millions that died in the Soviet Union, the millions that died in Germany. And he does this great comparative of how we had the losses, our losses equated to like the least amount of access for. I mean, we had the least amount, but we built it up to be this big thing. So highly recommend. Get into Oliver Stone.
Getting those alternate perspectives is so important.
The Untold History of the United States. Yeah. It's phenomenal. It tracks it up to very modern day, but it's a great factual piece to watch. But yeah, like Platoon, this was Stone's take on it, and anybody that's checked out anything from Oliver Stone, very anti.
Oh yeah.
Very anti. So because Platoon is actually the one film that I've in speaking with some folks, like the very few times, I remember one time my grandfather, who was there, who I explained was the warrant officer, pilot and such, he was one of the people that I remember, I'll never forget at a very young age, like when Platoon had come out, because I was probably like 6-7 years old at the time. I remember we were discussing it, and I had just mentioned Platoon, and he had said, that's not how, it's not like that. And I was kind of,
you were like, oh.
I just kind of went, whoa. Okay. And so it's different because we get to see Oliver Stone's take, and it's one of those things where, visuals are good.
Yeah.
The moving around, they do really great capturing the time and, the daily of what they endured. But we get into this piece where you have another person who's not only part of the jungle, but he's like the extreme part of it in Tom Berenger, who you see, and this is another guy, like, he can't leave. There's nowhere else this guy can function but here.
Yeah.
And then you run into this great leader in Willem Dafoe, and
love Willem Dafoe.
But then you end up, I think Stone was trying to capture just the extremes of what the extreme effects of what war can do on you mentally, and when you get so trapped in, because eventually, Tom Berenger hunts down his own guy, Willem Dafoe, and kills him, and then you end up with this crazy scene where everybody's on the chopper getting away, and they're like, wait, is that one of ours? And it's Willem Dafoe, and he's still alive, and he's running and getting gunned down, and everybody's like, nothing we can do.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, like, trying to court-martial, everybody's talking about, like, we need to tell about what happened, and Charlie Sheen's adamant about it, Tom Berenger starts threatening him, and he's like, you end up like him, and it becomes really frightening, and I think that's what Oliver Stone, because anything Oliver Stone makes is so deeply psychological.
Yes.
I mean, it's so, and it's on the fringe. I mean, it's on the absolute fringes of psyche. It's insane, some of the stuff he gets into, and you're just kind of, oh my god.
But I think it's a good platform for it, and he's a good voice for it.
I think it's a great lens to have it through, to sit there and just go, it's not too far from the truth to think that this is how deranged some people could have been.
Yeah.
This is how it could have affected them.
Well, because it's like when you look at, like, I mean, if we take it back to World War II and look at some of the Nazi generals, it was just a platform to get out, these feelings that they had, like the experiments they did, they were just that crazy, know?
And that's what it was.
And how do those extremes,
It takes you over. And one thing that, I think another reason he made this, is because Oliver Stone's always been, very anti-war, anti so much. I think it's one of those pieces where Oliver Stone was he has Vietnam exposure. He's been, so he's seen it. But I imagine when he was there, he was more like we see with Matthew Modine in Full Metal Jacket, the peace guy, because Matthew Modine gets questioned, is that a peace sign, son? And he has the general, there ain't a goddamn peace sign in my military.
There ain't a peace sign right now.
And then before we go on to Desert Storm, Desert Shield, like I said, there's this amazing book, highly recommend it. It was given to me by my dad, who had acquired it. My dad was in the latter end of Vietnam, and it was a book that he gave me before I deployed for my first time to Iraq. And it's called In Love and War. It's written by Jim and Sybil Stockdale. Jim Stockdale is a naval aviator, a carrier pilot, and he was a POW for about 7 years. During this whole time, his wife is back home, wondering just what the hell's going on. She has no clue what's going on with her husband, and the way that they attack this book is he writes a chapter, she writes a chapter. Okay. And so you get it from the two scopes, but you get a very, very, very disturbing reality of what a POW goes through. Yeah. And I'm not lying, the book will make you emotional. It will make you upset. It will make you cry. But my dad, sent it to me because no matter what, through this whole ordeal, Jim Stockdale serves with honor. He does everything he's supposed to. He sticks to the book. And through the amount of suffering and abuse and torture and everything he went through, he sticks to it. Yeah. And my dad, I remember when he sent it to me, he's like, long ago when I was trying to figure out what it meant to serve with honor, this book meant so much to me. I want you to have it now. And I did. I read it through my first deployment, and I was just taken away by it. I was just like, very, very, very real, but it definitely touches on the political piece of it too, because he would do his pilot debriefs early on. They would go, they would drop, and they would drop munitions and take care of stuff that were legit targets, weapons, compounds, training areas, things like that, where combatants were. Yeah. But then later on in the war, now all of a sudden he's out flying missions, and they're just dropping stuff in the middle of fields. And he starts to question it.
He's like, why am I doing this?
He's like, wait, what's going on here? Why are we not hitting positions? He's like, I know the positions we should hit are over here. Yeah. Why the hell am I doing this? And then that's when he gets shot down. And it's insane. Like, from the shoot down, wakes up in the middle of somewhere with the chute's still on. His leg is completely shattered, and he hears just a truck pulling up on a road, and they just grab him like a sack of potatoes and throw him in.
Oh man.
Busted leg, flesh and all over the place and everything, and just start taking him off, put a hood over his head, blindfold him. For the next 7 years, he went through just relentless torture, abuse, everything.
Jeez.
You know, and his wife doesn't know.
Yeah.
And at the same time, his wife, Sybil, is all the way up to the president. I mean, she's up at Tricky Dick. You know, it's kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Where is my husband? Well, we got POWs, and his wife's like, no, fuck that. I want to know. And it's crazy because this woman doesn't even know if her husband's alive. She has like 3-4 sons at home that she's raising on her own, and she pushes on every day as if he's going to come back, Then finally, after about 7 years, you know, he makes it home. Somebody, you know, but read it.
Dang.
Super good.
That was 10 out of 10. Damn.
I love, we can talk Vietnam all
We're
day.
not sponsored, I promise.
But
no,
like,
I'm just kidding.
Like you said, we want to talk about modern war.
Yeah.
I told you, Desert Storm and Desert Shield.
Because Modern War is another interesting.
And there's not really enough on it yet, so we both knew, we were like, there's a little bit we can get into with this.
And it's hard
but there's just not enough layers yet. I think we'll have to, at the end of the current conflict, I think we'll have a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But right now,
oh my God, and it's just so interesting too. I do see, you know, because I mean, you know, like you said, these conflicts are still going on, but very early on, like seeing modern war films versus Vietnam, World War II, World War I, it's such a different approach, and we've talked about this a lot already, like just, you know, as we were developing these episodes and things, but, you know, commercialization of the conflict and, you know, who is the audience for these films, why are these situations being, you know, romanticized because they shouldn't be.
Or spoofed.
Yeah!
That's the biggest piece to come out of Desert Storm and Desert Shield.
Because that was a huge one,
It didn't take long.
Yeah.
Like, we steamrolled them. I mean, Saddam Hussein showed up at the border of Kuwait and was like, I'm going to take this place over. And the United States like, don't think about it. Come over there. Don't think about it. And he's like, no, I'm going to try it. And then we went over there and we steamrolled. We gave him our own blitzkrieg. I mean, this was a conflict that was won by air power very, very quick. We launched everything we had around the clock, and before you knew it, his forces were beaten back. Desert Storm was over. We got into Desert Shield. It's a sustainment thing. Saddam never bucked up again. We left it alone. The conflict was so quick, and we beat them so bad that it spawned spoof films. And we ended up with stuff like Hot Shots.
Okay.
You know, with Charlie Sheen.
Team America isn't really.
Team America.
Yeah, Team America.
Well, Team America, I'll get to that.
Oh my God.
Honestly, one of my absolute favorites. But I love Team America so much.
My parents used to sing that Kim Jong-un song.
It's just it's such a good film.
Yeah.
But we started spawning these things, and it's not like Hot Shots was really Hot Shots 1 and Part 2. You know, it was really a parody on like a ton of films. I mean, it's a parody on Rambo, on Top Gun.
Oh my God, Rambo and Top Gun.
But the thing is that like we made Saddam Hussein out to be this buffoon.
Yeah.
You know, in the films, like he was a guy who had a little toy dog that he carried around with him in his palace. He had pink slippers on. He ate cookies in bed.
Yeah.
He had like the little vacuum that he'd suck his beard up. It was all these things. So we just made fun of him. And then like even in like in another one, we make fun of him again, where he's out back having lemonade by his pool, and he catches a bomb before it goes off, you know, so there wasn't really anything there, and it even went into, you know, films like The Naked Gun and stuff like that, where even showing it, like when you have Frank Drebin.
The dictator.
Frank Drebin's like fighting, you know, all these people that are, you know, one's like Idi Amin, and you got the Ayatollah and Gorbachev and all these guys. You know, and he's doing this, so like we made a mockery of it. We made a spoof of it.
Tonally, I think in today's modern climate, compared to that of Vietnam, World War II, World War I, you know, because I see in all these spoof films, I see a lot of the same critiques that are coming up as there was in World War II, World War I, etc., ex-Vietnam. But I feel like in today's climate, it almost has to be dealt with in a way that's going to not alienate people immediately. And I think spoof and comedy is a way to do that, and a way to have vessels for that. So it almost makes sense that comedy films like rose up so much.
And they did. It was just so easy to spoof this, because it's just like, after so many years, we've shown that we're supreme power. We can just beat you into submission. And even in one of the Hot Shots films, this guy does a great job. He breaks the fourth wall, and he looks right at the camera. And he's like, "War, it's fantastic." And you're just kind of going, "Oh my God, we've gotten to that now."
Yeah.
But then it goes on for a little bit, and then of course, when we were talking last time, we were talking about intelligence failures, and we were talking about how Pearl Harbor
where America
was the first
fails and how
great
they deal
intelligence
with
failure, and then now you run into 9/11, and 9/11 kicks off Iraq and Afghanistan, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Anaconda, everything's going on. It's still going on now.
Yeah.
18 years we are into this conflict, and again, it's so hard to put something. Now I'm not gonna lie, there's been a couple films that are two that we'll highlight that are brilliant, and I won't get into them at all because I just want people to see them. But for mentioning two films that highlight just singular heroics that are exceptional, but then also one of them does show the battle back home, and it's where post-traumatic stress really started gaining the headway. Because the time that this individual was engaged in conflict when he came home and this film really helped him start to identify it. So, God rest his soul now, but at the same time, that was special. And it was something good. It was something, like you said, that needed to be addressed, needed to be said.
Is this American Sniper?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then also,
yes.
even further, he was killed in a situation where it was somebody who wasn't able to deal with the PTSD in a healthy way, so it really really shows.
And his own battle was just it was just to see that on film was just gut wrenching.
Well, American Sniper was
so
interesting
difficult.
too. I'm a pretty big it was Clint Eastwood, right? I don't know. Clint Eastwood's all right. But, American Sniper, I really liked the format of the film in terms of the parallels between both sides of the conflict. I thought that was a really interesting step. And especially for American film because, you brought this up. I don't remember if it was this episode or the previous. American film and depending on the type of American film, they really like to be like, we're the only good and everyone else is bad. And American Sniper, I felt, was one of the most even depictions I've seen on cinema. So that was really good.
It does, because it doesn't overdo what it is. It doesn't try to over vilify someone.
Which is important,
At that point, because you don't need to.
Yeah.
Because we were attacked on September 11th. That did it.
Yeah.
You don't need to do anything past that.
Yeah.
And then when you have an active individual, and I think it's another piece because we have technology, where you had someone like Osama bin Laden, who's able to put out videos and say, we did this, we claim it, death to America. When you can see that, you don't need film to create that anymore. It's sitting there creating itself. All you have to do is capitalize on it.
Yeah, and you got that lightly during Vietnam because Vietnam was one of the first really televised wars, but now it's almost gone completely in the other direction.
Well, you really bring up good points, and I love that we don't have to, do this extension, this vilification. It's there with modern technology. We can see the evil of man face to face. I mean, go on any medium search engine, and the things that you can watch and look at are atrocious. They're
just the
disgusting.
idea that snuff films is something people look out and people can find.
And so American Sniper does so great at capturing, this amazing American in Chris Kyle, and I absolutely love it. Another film that really does great and hits on individual heroics is Lone Survivor. Really tough film for me personally to watch, but it's impeccable. It's really good. Mark Wahlberg does an exceptional job at telling the story, and it's good just because it's one of those things. It snaps you into the reality of what it is now. Because every time everybody thinks about war, they like to kick back to, World War II, Vietnam, that was wild, but we didn't have that. And Desert Storm, that was quick, but now we're back in the same theater, so it can't be that or this. This Lone Survivor shows just what happens in the strength of one man, and his unit and what they can do. And then this one, absolutely, it's a must-see, Restrepo.
Yes.
It's a documentary. It's very real. It will make you cry. It's tough. But it's cameras.
It's needed.
Sebastian Junger had done it, and there was a book on it. They did the film. it's crazy to see the videos from the kids on the plane, knowing that some won't make it.
Yeah.
And then you get there and you see what goes on. You see the meager conditions. That's a year or more. That's what that is. So that's why I won't get into Restrepo too much, but I would absolutely say
10 out of 10.
Anybody that wants to know the harsh reality of the day-to-day, watch Restrepo and understand it takes you in. And then one thing that's really, I have to mention this film just because I've met an individual.
You have a really interesting background with
I do.
it. Yeah,
I met an individual. It's called 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. Not necessarily a piece about, it's not a war film. However, it shows how poor politics and poor recognition, the poor politics can get you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And what's exceptional about this is you have these men, with Tig and everybody, John Tygan, who I've met, shook hands with him, was able to share stories with him, an incredible individual. And he was one of the survivors of Benghazi. He was involved. He was directly involved with firefighting. Anybody who knows Benghazi has heard Tig, and they know about the other men that were there that survived. But I mean, there's so much that goes around it. But when you're face to face with the person and you know this person and you're like, everything that was said is true.
Yeah.
It's honest, it's true. Every word that was written in the book and everything that went on in the film was true because him and the other guys were there during the film. They were telling the stars exactly what happened, exactly what went down and how it went. It's a very vivid, a very real story. But I think it's good because it shows the honor and it shows the American service member outside of the role past the military because now they're contractors, they're civilian contractors there, and they're charged with protecting our Americans at the embassy, and when you read the book and you hear just what these are three men, what they went through to try and save that individual, the burning building that they kept going into repeatedly. I mean, this guy has injuries. He has stuff that's going to stick with him for the rest of his life. It's going to ail him the rest of his life.
Yeah.
That's another one of those things because so much of what we've been talking about highlights, how others are vilified and what goes on and how it goes for military members and this and that. I think it's the reason I love talking about 13 Hours is just because it shows how that honor and brotherhood continue on, and no matter what, there's no race, no creed, no color, nothing. American. Yeah. If you are American, I don't care who you are, I don't care what you come from, where you do anything, you're American. Yeah. And I will defend you. I will not let you die. I have been charged. So it shows just what it takes, that real special cut of individual, that real finite, little, tiny piece that you can barely see. They exist. Yeah. They are real. This is not just a film. Yeah. These people, it happens.
And it kind of feels like Band of Brothers a little bit, the collaboration.
And the people who want to talk shit about these people, they should thank God every day that they have the freedom to even do that because of individuals like that. You do. I mean, that's, at any point, somebody could walk away and say, fuck this. What is this? Why am I over here? That's why I enjoy, talking about it. But and you can see that's why Iraq and Afghanistan is so brief because we have like individual stories, incredible American heroics. We have a great reality documentary, and then we have this thing that talks about just how deep that bond is afterwards.
Yeah, and also like it's interesting too with this because I mean just talking about going back to like the cinematic history of all of it. Oh my God, we're getting so close. We're gonna be right up to it.
I started that like 5 minutes late too, so we're probably past
lit. Okay, that's all good. But going through this and seeing the cinematic history of war film and seeing how it tracks through, it's interesting because we have World War I and World War II, and we aren't necessarily seeing what's happening at the same time as films are coming out. Vietnam, we're getting a taste of what's happening while films are coming out. Yeah. But then with Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Iraq, Afghanistan, all that stuff, we're able to see what's happening at the same time, and how that influences the filmmaking is really, it's interesting to see, and I'm excited to see the response to the aftermath.
It's great, but at the same time, it's that part that we touched on, where you're monetizing off a conflict that's it's still going. Yeah. World War I films came out. I mean, when we started looking at it, World War I was over in 1919, 1920, 30, Grand Illusion 37, Pass of Glory 57,
Yeah.
All Quiet on the Western Front 30. These films were being made after, and even some in Hollywood, which we always talk about, we were already Nazifying Germany.
Yeah.
In World War I films, when the Nazi regime didn't even
exist
come out
yet.
until 20 years past
Oh
that
my God,
war.
100%.
And so we can always get into that, and that would be a good thing when Rob's on to talk
Get
about.
into like how not every German person before World War.
You look at that. World War II films started coming out in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Vietnam films were coming out at the end of Vietnam, like during Vietnamization, afterward, and in the 80s, our spoof films were coming out, in the mid 90s, the films, but those conflicts were done.
Yeah.
This conflict is still going.
It's still happening.
And this is just a small bit of things.
It almost
We could start
feels like
talking
it's
about
a
Hurt Locker,
propagating,
we start,
the conflict,
Yep.
which is so weird.
And that's the only piece that I don't like about it. And that's why I mention these films because I feel they're outside of that.
Yeah.
Whereas there's other ones that have no reality attached to them.
Yeah.
It's just a good film about the desert. And
Yeah.
those are the ones where I go, okay, you're capitalizing on conflict. But when you get to these are outside of that. These are a true story. It's okay. But when you continue to go on it and that conflict becomes a common, not in just war film, that conflict becomes a common theme in all film.
Yeah.
It's in comedy, it's in dramas, it's in action films especially. It's not just specifically war film anymore. This vilification, just like was done with the Nazification.
100%, yeah.
And you have that. So that's where it pisses me off. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like it.
Oh my God,
because
100%.
if the conflict is over, go for it. But when you're sitting here capitalizing on it when it's in there, I mean, great. If
Also,
you want,
like, in the
if you want to
midst
do
of
it, do it. But I'm not gonna watch it.
Yeah.
If I don't see, if there's not a story, if it's not a Chris Kyle, if it's not a Marcus Luttrell, if it's not Tig and Tonto and everybody at 13 hours, if it's not the young men of Restrepo, if there's no reality, I don't want to sit through it. I don't want to see your take on it.
Yeah. Because
it's
almost it feels a lot like it feels similar to the identity creating that was happening in early World War II films. We're in a place where I don't think we can say who is in the wrong, who is in the right, all that type of thing with these conflicts yet because we haven't seen them play out all the way.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see cinema after the conflicts are over, reflecting on the conflicts
and
as
even
opposed
more
to being
so
in the midst.
when you get people that are in it.
Yes,
And
yes.
once again, that's why these stories are attractive because you can relate to them. You understand these are real people. They have real families. They still have people surviving them. When we were talking about World War II, even it's so much better when you get to stuff like Band of Brothers, where you have the real person that was there, and you get to talk to them. But now it's like within this conflict, I especially dislike it when I see TV shows. I mean, I think before I had gotten rid of television, because I was so blown away by the amount of just ridiculous shit that's on. We could do an episode about horrible shit
Horrible
on TV.
Yeah.
But the thing is like you look. I remember there was this one thing, and it made me sick almost when I saw the commercials for it because they were talking. They had young men. I mean, these guys 10, 15 years younger than me. They were talking about firefights that they were involved in, and then they were doing they were doing these reenactments, and I'm sitting here just going, God, this guy was engaged in this a year ago, 10 years ago, and they're retelling it. They're trying to retell this.
Oh
and
my
I'm
God!
I was like, I appreciate, that you want to tell the story and stuff, but when it's a TV show. And that's why it's good to talk about Team America as well. We will leave this.
we will leave this
shit.
Team
We're
America.
going to be going audio here in a minute. I know, because the camera's going to die. But I'm not talking about propaganda, war film, anything without mentioning Team America.
Okay, go for it.
And the
it's all yours. The floor is
the
yours.
impeccable amount of detail that goes into the film. I mean, you have these puppets that have the best expressions ever. 100%. How they capture. Look at the details of the film, though. Like when you go into Kim Jong-il's palace and stuff, and you see all these fine details. You see there's places where you see dollar bills woven in it. There's so much impeccable detail to it. But even more so, just the vision of it. Thinking up the sound effects. I know the dialogue was no problem for me.
Yeah.
Because those guys are natural. I'm an avid South Park fan. I've seen every South Park. I grew up on South Park. I own all the movies. Bigger, Longer, Uncut is one of the best animated films ever of all time.
Convince me. You're like at that table that's like, convince me otherwise.
Yes, it's just great. But I love Team America because it it sums up having, you know, like we talked about in episode 1, you know, I was in Korea, I was in Italy, I went all over Europe, all over Pacific, all over the Middle East, you know, I've been to 30-some different countries, you know. I love Team America so much, and it's funny because we were watching this on my first deployment in Iraq.
Really?
It came out, and we got it delivered to us on DVD, shipped over there, and everybody's in. We all launched our aircraft, and everybody's in there trying to watch Team America before our jets come back. You know, and we're just laughing hysterically. Here we are watching this anti-war film.
You're in the middle of it,
and we're watching it, and we're just loving it. But it's so funny, and the best part that. Says it in the song when you know America, fuck yeah, all the way to see the motherfucking day, you know, and it's like and then they eventually there's the one time they cut to the news and it's like Peter Jennings or something. He's like, once again, Team America has pissed off the entire world, you know, and it's just like exactly that's what we do, you know. It's like, oh, you guys are fighting over here. You know what? If we don't get involved, we're not gonna get oil. Shit. You know, so I love Team America so much because it's just such a brilliant parody on the business that America is. America has stopped being a country 100%. A long time ago. The United States, a long time ago, we abandoned that. When America became a business.
Oh my God,
when we had people going, I want Pepsi, I want Coke, I want vehicles, I want this. We were just like, hi, this is my business card. I work for America.
I work for America.
We're a Fortune 500 company.
Oh my God.
You know, you see us on the New York Stock Exchange. America's been a business for the longest time, and that's why I love that film, because it in a meta way, it just sums up America is a business, and it's like no matter where it is, we're gonna poke our nose in it.
Well, I think it's hilarious that you guys are literally middle of conflict. Like, you know what? This is pretty right.
It was terrible because like you would sit there and like you'd be watching the film, and then like you'd hear like mortars or rockets that go off or something. Like, oh shit! And then you got to go over here, and then all the jets are coming back. All right, go catch your jets. Oh, you got to turn your jet, put bombs on it. It's going to attack. Oh shit! How much of Team America I'm missing right now?
You're like, son of a bitch! I didn't press pause.
I know. So you can't wait to be stationed, and you can't wait to get your week in the alert shack because it has beds, and you're literally just sitting there waiting to get the alert call. And that's where you have to run and get your jet off the ground in like 5 minutes. And so you're just chilling. Otherwise, you're doing nothing, just sitting by a phone and watching movies. And so Team America, the DVD, made its way to the alert shack, and everyone was enjoying it week after week, and then quoting the lines and fucking shit, you know, going around. But it's just so, it's so, you can't, I watched it this weekend just because I have like a massive DVD collection like upstairs in this like hallway closet. It's just a shelf packed, you know, DVDs like 4 deep, and then I take my select ones and I put them downstairs. You know, my unsplay DVD. Cuts. Yeah, my choice. You know? Like I have like all like the Kubrick and the Hitchcock.
Oh,
and,
gotcha.
Yeah, I got like Shogun Assassin.
I got that with my this is my Criterion collection.
Yeah, so I like to put in here's all my Coen collection. And Mel Brooks.
Oh my God, Mel Brooks.
We're gonna do a Mel Brooks episode.
Love Mel Brooks. Obsessed.
Go play a game I like to call Swallowing Things Under the Sink.
Right? Love that.
Please take the Tide Pod Challenge and don't stop. Please, if you think Team America is not funny,
my God.
I don't ever want to see your stupid face.
If there's a dislike on this video, I'm going to know it's from a Team America hater. No, I'm just kidding.
Good. That'll be one I'd respond to.
Right?
Everybody else, I'm just like, whatever, you say whatever the hell you want.
You're like, what did you say about Team America?
I don't even know where comments would go. That's how old I am. Okay?
I just want
people can comment on our talking show.
Our talking show.
I didn't even know
I've
that.
never saying good things.
Just had my rotary phone installed. You got computer thingy.
Obsessed.
Yes.
So
it will be good. We'll be able. I can't wait for the next episode.
The next one is gonna be good. Do you want to give a little prep for them, Nick?
Because we still have to we have to try and find a little more mentions.
I'm coming on from the female perspective here.
Yes,
you know?
And this is what I like because we're gonna talk about love stories.
Yeah.
And I was telling you, you kind of looked at me funny when we talked. I was just like, we should talk about love stories, and you're just like. What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
Cut to me, just like,
Yeah.
hate love. I'm just kidding.
And I could tell it too. I'm just like, no, you have a Caligari.
You were like, why do you hate
and I was
love?
like, no, I know that you approach love in a different way because you have a Caligari.
Straight up.
That is why. Anybody
calling me out. I came here for a
what
good time. No, I'm just kidding.
But then I was just like, no. I'm talking about like love stories, you know,
Yeah.
like from a guy's point of view, and you're like, well, like what? And I'm like, true romance. And
You're
you're
like,
just like,
I'm like, yeah,
you're like,
okay.
yes.
You had me at true romance.
And then I started, and you're like, we could talk all about true romance, and I mentioned a few other films, and a very early one that I'm going to be very excited to talk about, The Quiet Man, one of my absolute favorite films. And then you know, there's some others, but I was like, you know, it would be fun to talk about, you know, these really deep, good films, you know, that guys love, but then it's a love story.
Yeah.
It's in like true romance. We really got
I mean,
onto
like,
this
guys get this bad rap where they're like, you know, you can't like love stories, but that's the, you know, you can.
Yeah, and
there's love stories out there for you.
There are. And I thought, and when we were discussing it, you know, I threw some others out there and we agreed on them, you know, and we thought they were really neat. But
what was it? Leaving Las Vegas, I think.
Yes, Leaving Las Vegas is good. Romancing the Stone is a good one. And of course, The Princess Bride.
Oh my God,
You can't go without talking about Regal Montoya and young Wesley.
Prepare to Die.
Yes, you know.
If people don't like Team America, Prepare to Die.
Yeah.
With your little sword.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You'll be on. But like we were talking about that, and then we were thinking about like how cool would it be from the female perspective to be like, no, damn it, you need to watch this with me. It's good, you know. And
you are gonna like it.
You will like this love story. So you're gonna do a little bit of research and find these ones that you're gonna argue. And
I'm bringing in the tough love.
Yes, good. Well, because, I mean, it's good. I'm glad we're establishing it now because I guarantee that there are people like, if they say Notebook or Fever Pitch in the next 2 seconds,
oh my God.
I am done with them.
Oof, you got the wrong one for Notebook and Fever Pitch.
You will not hear us talking about those.
Those two are not coming up.
If they were here, I'd break them right now.
I feel sick now. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. We're going to leave them where they belong. The $5 bin at Walmart.
Oh, drag her.
Yes. Crap. So yeah, we're not.
The bottom of the $5 bin.
Yeah, because if it was like talking love stories, I'd be like, okay, we can talk about Casablanca and then we're done.
Oh my God.
That's where I would stop.
I can't believe. Oh my God.
I would like, we'll talk about Casablanca and I'm done.
She's putting on Casablanca. I don't know why I said it like that. Casablanca. Casablanca. So anyway.
New York City.
Yeah, literally. I'm like, I don't know what came over me just now.
Casablanca. That's like Casablanca is the only love story I will talk about.
Oh, it's so good.
Otherwise, there's none. Otherwise, if we're talking love stories, I'm going to start talking about sport films that made me cry. That's all. That's my love story.
Oh my God, did The Blind Side make you cry?
No.
Okay. No. I just needed to know.
There's only been...
I needed to know if you could keep being on the podcast.
You cry. You have no soul.
Yeah, and we're just gonna prepare to die.
Yes. Just do it.
So
you have to, but it's so much. So definitely, you're gonna want to hear our arguments on tough love. You're gonna want to hear the films we talk about. I'm excited about it.
Gonna be great.
It's gonna be a fun week. And then later on, we'll attack spaghetti westerns.
Spaghetti westerns. We're going to have some pretty cool guests next month, so pretty stoked about the Saturday show.
Yes.
As always, you guys can connect with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Gentlemen Prefer Cinephiles. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and YouTube. And I will see you on Tuesday, and Nick and I will see you next Saturday.
Yes, tough love.
Tough love.